Hello and welcome to the Writing Gals. You've probably noticed we're missing one gal. Amy is furiously trying to paint her house and get it ready for sale because she is moving to where Michelle lives. I'm not jealous at all.
I know, me neither.
Not moving near me, even though the house next door to me is for sale. I'm not bitter at all about that. So we're missing Amy, but we are here to talk about point of view. But first, we're going to talk about what we're doing. So, Judy, you want to take it away? What have you been up to lately?
So I'm still working on the charade. It's I've been doing for a while. I made it to, I think I'm close to 25,000 words. So, yeah, I'm doing good. I've also been working on updating my paperbacks to make them look a little better because the covers are just, I don't know, not as fantastic as I wanted them to be. So I've been working on that and switching them to being matte instead of glossy. So I'm excited about that.
Nice.
Yeah, that's basically what I've been doing. So hoping to finish my book maybe by the end of this month. We will see.
Nice. Awesome. And Michelle, what have you been up to? Oh, you're muted.
I've been madly finishing my book. It's currently due back from my editor sometime today. And so then I'll get to rush through and get it finished and get it published. Hopefully by this weekend. I know that's kind of a mad time frame, but I'm 3 weeks late. So I have to get it out this weekend. And but I'm really excited about it because she told me that I was on my A game for this one. So yay!
Yay, good.
That's always good to hear.
Yes. And then I am currently working on my co-writing project today, and then just a bunch of business stuff, trying to update my website and do some stuff with my newsletter, all that kind of stuff before I have to do taxes next week.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but I'm excited. Writing is fun again for a little while, and glad to be putting out a book at the very beginning of February this year instead of April like I did last year. So that's
nice. That's awesome.
Yep.
And I've been furiously trying to finish my book too. I am sending it off to the content editor this Saturday, so I have to get it done. So I have a nice deadline here, and I'm almost done. I'm about 47,000 words into it, and it's going to end around 50. So almost done. So get that last heartbreak in and all that fun stuff. I'm in the dark moment right now, which I enjoy writing that. So that's my fun time. And then they get to get back together and be all happy. So yay. All right, let's dive into point of view. We have a lot of questions today. So I am just going to start off with kind of some of the basic questions that we got. And one of the first ones we're going to do is, could you discuss the difference between point of view and perspective? I've seen some comments in groups about how you aren't supposed to change point of view in scenes/chapters. And I think they're talking about perspective rather than point of view because they refer to different characters. There's gotten to be this idea that you should only have one perspective per chapter/scene. And I think it's because people have heard you shouldn't switch point of view. So what are your thoughts on that?
So first, the definition of like a point of view is if you're like in first person or third person or whatever. So it depends on like how kind of like close you are to the character's thoughts. So
like who the narrator is.
Yeah, who the narrator is. And then perspective is like which actual character who you're speaking for at that point.
So actually, I went in and researched this because I wanted to like dig into it a little bit. And perspective is not actually just the character. Like perspective in the more literary definition of it means what that how that character views, it's their world view. So it's like their perspective. So it's like kind of like this little like mental jog you have to take. Like, yes, it's seeing it through that character's eye, but perspective in literary terms actually means like their world views and opinions. It's not as closely related to point of view as it's not interchangeable with point of view. So I think it's the difference between point of view character and then perspective is what that point of view character's perspective is. So it's like bringing to a scene their interpretation of things is the perspective, which is kind of funny. But like, yeah, it can be different when people are talking about changing point of view, whether or not you're talking about the narration type versus the character. So,
people use them interchangeably, and it gets
Yeah.
confusing because people do say don't
Yeah.
switch point of view when they mean don't change your point of view character. So
Yes.
yeah, people say it interchangeably, so it can be confusing. But
Yeah,
I think that the advice still stands for me. You don't want to be head hopping within a scene because that gets really confusing to the reader.
Yeah.
At least, you just, if you want to do it in the same chapter, at least have some sort of like a 3 asterisks or whatever, some kind of break to show that you're switching.
Yeah. I wouldn't change point of view character if we just like label it that way, unless it's something like Judy says, where you have a clear change in who is now telling you the events through their perspective and their bias and their, sort of view of the situation. And then a lot of people get confused with omniscient, like third person omniscient versus head hopping, because in third person omniscient, the narrator knows the thoughts and feelings of all the characters, but it's not head hopping. Head hopping is when you are changing your actual point of view to being a different characters back and forth and back and forth and back and forth when you're writing third person limited. If you're writing third person omniscient, your narrator doesn't change. The narrator just has lots of information. And so that's where a lot of people really get confused on head hopping versus omniscient. But luckily not very many people actually write in the omniscient anymore, except maybe in some fantasy.
Yes. Good way to explain all that. All right, the next question is balancing more than one point of view when characters are in the same locations. She writes fantasy, so oftentimes entire stories are separate until they merge. She's got that point of view bit down, but what she's wondering is how to balance characters in the same place / scene when both characters are equally important for the plot and the story arc.
I always like to go with who has the most to lose at that point. And so you want to have the one who's got the most at stake, the most impact on the story, like have it being through their point of view. And then if that dynamic changes at some point, then that's a good time to change character point of view. So your point of view character. So I always like to get, like, for example, in a romance, if I'm writing a kiss scene and I really wanted to have the kiss from hers and from his perspective, I always look at the kiss and I think, okay, at which point in the kiss is it more dynamic to have it from her perspective, and when is it more dynamic to have it from his? And then I always try and set it up. And a lot of times I will either switch chapters. I like to change chapters in the middle of exciting action anyway, and continue
turning pages. Can't put it down.
And I also like to go ahead. If I don't change in the middle of the kiss, I always like to go immediately after, so that I can get that other character's reaction to the whole thing. And it's pretty much just that same thing. You just have to look at it and say, well, it's going to actually be kind of boring from this character. So I'm going to turn the camera on somebody else, kind of thing.
Yeah. And like with my first,
go ahead.
I was going to say with my first, like most of my books, I guess, anyways, I thought that I needed to like have equal time in each character's head. And so I would this one is from the guy, this one's from the girl, and I'd alternate every single chapter. But then recently I've allowed myself to be a little more flexible, and sometimes the girl will have 2 chapters in a row, and then the guy will only have 1, and then the girl will have 3 maybe, or whatever. So it's okay to also not have them be equally shown, because you also will get to see in that scene, you can still see things from how that other character is reacting based on their actions and facial expressions or tone or whatever.
Yeah,
exactly.
And
sometimes if I'm not sure which character has the most to lose, I will write that scene from 2 different perspectives. I'll just do it twice, and then I'll figure out which one has the best impact.
I was gonna say if I get to where I'm alternating regularly, I kind of like to stay that way because then the reader is expecting that next point of view to be like regular kind of thing. And if I am going to mix it up, you kind of have to do it from the beginning.
Yeah.
Especially since it's already kind of difficult to write two point of views that sound different enough, So a lot of times readers depend on that regularity to get it right, unless they're used to you switching it up. Like unless they know I got to be on my toes and pay attention here. So
yes. And Judy touched on this next question. The question is, I struggle to not put the thoughts from the other character in another's point of view. How do I write so both characters' thoughts are understood, but it doesn't get convoluted?
Yeah, so basically, just kind of what I was saying with you, showing the other character reacting in certain ways by their actions or their tone of voice, or maybe even just what they're saying. You can kind of give an idea of that by showing. And the emotion thesaurus is a great resource for that. That's something I still use, and I've been doing this for a while. So
yeah,
me too. All right, we talked a little bit about is okay to change point of view in a chapter break instead of a new chapter. I do it all the time, so I think it's fine. The next question is third person perspective focused on one person, just that, but how to write without revealing something about your character you don't want to be revealed yet. So if you're in someone's point of view, but they know something you don't want to reveal to your audience, how do you deal with that?
Oh, go ahead, Michelle. Here, it looks like you got something good to say.
So this is tricky for me because I have been actually discussing this pretty closely with my developmental editor, and she's had a few other projects that people have tried to have unreliable narrators, and it kind of falls really closely into that. It like runs parallel with it. The thing is that too many authors try and have like these twists and these surprises, and so they just don't let the reader tell or the character tell the reader important information. And you have to be really careful that it doesn't come off like a cheap trick, right? That it doesn't annoy the reader, that you purposefully kept something from them, and they will know, And so if you're trying to hide something really, really obvious, you're just going to end up betraying your reader.
Mm-hmm.
There are small things that you can kind of keep hidden just by having like subtext and having it walk away and like walk around it so that the character's referring to it, but in ways that might have like multiple meanings, or it might not be clear, and it just creates a question in the reader's mind to make them look closer and keep looking for that information. But I really think you're playing with a dangerous line there in really annoying a reader to have your main character not reveal information that they know. And the best way, I think, is just to write better conflict in your story. If your conflict and your big surprise moments depend sheerly on your main character not telling the reader something, then it means it's not very strong. It's not something that your plot is actually able to kind of stand on its own 2 feet. Most of the time, you just need to plot better so that you can reveal that same thing, but your character is still interested, and there are still questions, and there's still something at stake. If it kills the conflict, if it kills the questions and what's at stake, then you don't have a very strong plot. If it all depends on a character's secret to maintain that tension through the story, then you need to re-examine it, in my opinion. Of course, I'm also working on a story right now where the character is going to keep secret the fact. Okay, so I was going to try and keep the fact that the character was sisters with somebody else that's really important in the story. And I thought the only way I can do this is if I don't have it from her point of view at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I had to stop and think, like, wait a second, what am I going to gain by the reader not knowing that it's her sister? Right? So to me, it came up, well, I really want it to be in her point of view too. And so the tension's not going to come from the big reveal to the reader that it's her sister. The payoff or the twist, the change in the conflict's going to come when the other character finds out that it's her sister. And that's what you always have to examine and look at, is who exactly are you really trying to surprise with that twist. And it should be another character as much as the reader, or more than the reader, unless you're writing mystery, and that's like a whole different thing. But usually mystery is about the protagonist figuring out the clues and the villain hiding the question. So you can have that unreliable narrator as a villain in a mystery, and it works.
See, and it's just kind of tricky. Like I just listened to a book where the main characters obviously knew this secret and they weren't telling us what it was, but we were pretty sure based on things that were said what it was. But it didn't bother me a lot. And I guess the reason why it worked was because the characters both had an idea of what this thing that had happened in the past was, when really the female character had a major misunderstanding of what it was, where the guy did. And so I don't know, it worked, but definitely need to be making sure that you do what Michelle said.
I think unreliable narrators are awesome in fantasy, and I think they're awesome in literary fiction and a lot of different things like that. They just do not work as well in romance.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing a lot of people trying to use them in romance.
I almost tried to do that with the charade, and then I'm like, no, that's way too complicated for me. So I'm going to go with something else.
It's payoff and reward, right? Like, is it worth making your reader mad to get the reward that you're trying to give them? Yeah.
Or is the shock going to be like good enough to like make it really, really hard for your brain to figure out?
And so that they'll still forgive you for it, right?
Yeah.
Right. All right. Thoughts on what sells? What draws readers to a certain point of view? Drawbacks for each? How other writers determine which point of view is best for their story? Certain genres have certain point of view appeals, but what works best in which market?
Right now, the most popular point of view in romance is first person, I'm seeing. So if you're writing that and you like writing first person, then do it.
I think first person in general is having a surge of popularity across genres.
Yeah, I see it. I see it a lot.
Like even in historical romance, I'm seeing a lot more first person. But even though it's popular, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a do or die thing, and it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be a lot of people out there who just don't like it. But it's more all the markets are more forgiving towards first person than they've ever been, I think. And some definitely prefer it. I think first person obviously prefers it. I think chick lit prefers it. I think rom-com to an extent prefers first person.
Young adult.
Young adult. Yeah. If I didn't say young adult, definitely young adult. And the past or present tense is also important and plays a big role in that. So yeah, I think first person is like a golden ticket in a lot of genres, but at the same time, contemporary romance and historical romance are going to be solid in third. Like, you're not going to make anybody mad in third person. So at that point, you just have to think really hard about, what am I good at writing? Yeah. What can I do well? And what serves my story best? Because both of them definitely have some advantages and some drawbacks to them. And some people just aren't very good at writing first person. It's hard. It's a very challenging point of view to write in.
See, and I'm not very good at writing third person. I just went back and switched one of my books. I'm like, oh, that was not what that was good for me anyway.
Yep. Perfect. Since you're writing mostly YA, huh?
Yes.
It's right in your wheelhouse.
All right. Does point of view make a difference depending on the genre? And we talked about that. Does it need to be dual point of view from both female main character and male main character if you're writing romance?
Not always, but I know a lot of readers really, really like to get the male point of perspective in there. So
yes.
It's not required. I go back and forth sometimes. So
yeah, we had several questions on is it necessary to have both points of view in romance? And I see it both ways. I see mostly female only or dual point of view. I don't usually see male only, but I don't see why you couldn't.
Yeah, I think there's a few people that are doing that. So could be on the rise too. Who knows?
Yeah.
So from the perspective of someone who's been writing for like one point of view in rom-com for my last 4 books, one thing that's difficult about writing from one point of view is it's really hard to create that dual conflict. So romance is so much about her conflict and his conflict, like what's keeping her from being able to be with him and what's keeping him from being able to be with her. When you write in his perspective, and when he's a point of view character, you're able to see every one of his challenges, what's at stake for him, what is his goal that's pulling him away from this romance, that process that goes through when he starts to question, okay, well, maybe I can be with her, and then something bad happens and he pulls back. That whole process that the story arc needs to go on in a romance is, I think, best done when you can see it happening for both characters. And it also is easier to write, because so many times I get through my story and I'm like, I know exactly why she can't be with him or why it's hard for her, but I've lost track on where he's at, what he's thinking, why would he pull away at this moment? It's because I'm not in his head like I would be if I was writing his point of view chapters. And so that's something that when I write contemporary romance, I think, since it's more popular there anyways, I think I would always go personally with the 2 point of view characters. I only don't do it in rom-com because it's so much more of a women's voice kind of thing. But a lot of people do both in rom-com and do just fine with it. So who knows? But there's definitely some challenges, I think, in not having it. And I have had readers mention that they really wanted to see things from his point of view and they wanted to know his thoughts. And how many of us have been really excited with the whole Edward's point of view from Twilight? I mean, for 10 years, people have been wanting to get a hold of that full thing, So, yeah, there's a lot to be said for having both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you really need it for people that actually like the guy, if they're like
Yes.
acting in certain ways, and people, they need to know why sometimes.
Like if they're an alpha, if they're a bad boy, if they're doing something that just makes them kind of an unlikable character, but you can see their internal thoughts and their reactions and their feelings and get so much more about their background. It's so much easier to create sympathy for that character if you can see into his heart and his soul. Yeah.
And that leads right into our next question, which is, how do you write the male point of view to make it sound different than the female point of view?
You just speak like a man in your head. I don't know. Just picturing some guy in your life saying the words.
Sometimes I get my husband to translate. I'm like, this is what I want him to say. So tell it, it's like, how would you say it? I used to do that a lot in my early days. And then you gradually learn, and it's really hard not to stereotype like men and women when you're trying to figure out how to write a different voice for them. Generally, I do try and stick to more concise sentences, more bare bones. I know when I text with my husband, I will text like these big old chunky blocks and I'll get like an okay or a yes or sounds good back from him. Like
I can't even like those kind of texts. I'm like, oh no, they're mad at me. Like,
yes,
add a smiley face or like, haha, or something.
Yes.
I'm like, they hate me.
And so what's fun is just trying to figure out, like, that's dialogue, especially for me. But I also try and apply the same thing to, all of their internal thoughts and all of the narration that's going on. Is like, I usually go in and edit it and just cut everything down. I cut down unnecessary phrases. I cut down unnecessary clauses to my sentences. I break them apart. So instead of having one really long sentence, I'll have 3 shorter sentences. I also try and make it not so intuitive. Men tend to be more action driven. They tend to be more analytical, but less intuitive, less sitting around thinking about feelings and what does it all mean. And like, they don't analyze that way. They analyze more like, she's staring at me and she looks angry. I did something wrong. Was it this? Like you just get into like the differences in how generally men and women's brains tend to process and function. And once you have that really kind of solid, then you can start to add variables based on your character. So maybe your character grew up with a lot of sisters, or maybe he was really close to like his mother or had a best friend that was a girl growing up. So those kinds of things would give him a lot more, in-depth understanding of how women work. And maybe it would have made him, more inclined to think about things that a guy raised with all brothers might not. He might just be a more sensitive type person. He might be more intellectual and really, really, process things in a different way. So I think it's good to understand sort of as a baseline how to make them stand out from each other. And then you just go in and figure out that character's personality and what that would add to that dynamic. But whatever it is, you just have to make them different. Like I could totally write a book where the girl is the one with the short, concise sentences and she's impatient and maybe she's impulsive or hot-tempered or all these different things that I might stereotypically say was more of a masculine type personality, and do him exactly the opposite. And it would work because they would be completely different characters and you could tell the difference in their voices just, by how each of them would read differently. So,
yeah. And also just like reading other books with the male main characters can help give you an idea of how to do it too. Just kind of pay attention to what they're doing.
One thing that's hard in clean romance is that we have to filter our men's thoughts. And I'm used to filtering women's thoughts and cleaning them up. But especially with men, I find it more of a challenge to filter their thoughts.
Yeah.
And what they think of. And it's kind of an interesting thing to think of. But it's kind of like with cursing. I just find ways to write around it so it's not like this obvious, unlikely sort of thought process for a man.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess in steamier romances, you just like go all out with that.
All right. So if you're writing a romance, is it okay to have like 80% of the book be from the female perspective and only 20% be from the male? Or if you're doing dual, do you need to kind of even it out?
Like it can, but I don't know. I think we prefer a little more of the guy than just 20%.
Yeah, I think every time I'm always hearing back from my editors, like, I'd really like to hear his reaction here. That kind of thing, like throughout the book, if I'm not doing that enough. And I think readers definitely have the same situation. Like if you introduce his point of view and they know that it's there, they're going to want it, especially in some really pivotal moments. And if you don't give it to them, they might get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing to play with if you're just trying to like have less from him and more from her is do shorter chapters from him, which I almost always try and do for my male characters anyway. It adds to that brevity and that conciseness that I like to have. But just if you write, 2,500 word chapters for your female, write 1,500 words from him. And that way you get less and you can stipple it more evenly through the story. So you're still writing fewer words from his perspective, but you're still giving it to the reader, at regular intervals to keep them touching base with him throughout the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say, these are just guidelines. So if you are writing a book and it is, people are so immersed in it, but then you have to switch to his point of view for just a couple of scenes and it works, if it's working for your novel, do it, because these are general guidelines and in general, people like more of a 50-50 in a romance novel. But if it's working for your particular book, do it.
I was just listening to a couple books where the author has a series about the the parents, and then it has these teens, their own series, and where most of the book was from the teens' point of view, but then near the end she wrote a couple chapters from the parents' point of view at some pivotal moments. So if it works, it works. So,
and I've done that. I've jumped into stepmom's point of view for like half a chapter, and that's the only part in the whole book with her point of view. But I've done it and it worked. I needed it.
Yeah.
So it just really kind of depends on your book.
I would say, especially in traditional romance, to be very cautious about adding more than just the main point of view, like the love interest point of view, because nobody else really has much at stake in the story. And I think your point of view character should always have something at stake, something, that's pivotal to the story, which in a romance is the romance. And so I would say to be very cautious about that in romance, and actually in any book. Don't just be adding, other point of view characters for the sake of adding point of view characters, or because
definitely slow down the story.
Or like sometimes people do it just because they're like, well, my characters can't be here at this place to see what's going on, so I'm going to add this point of view character in. But that point of view character actually doesn't even have an arc. I think point of view characters need to have an arc. They need to have, something at stake and going on in the story if I'm going to hear their voice in it. So opinions, I have them.
All right. Let's look at, can dual point of view work for other genres besides romance?
Yeah. Fantasy, there's like more than just dual too. There's like all kinds of them. So
yeah, I think like in mystery, like a cozy mystery, it would be awesome to have, a dual point of view between your, sleuth protagonist and your villain. I mean, that would be fun, except you don't always want to know who the villain is. But like in thrillers, you could do that. Or from two different people that are both trying to find the
work on this mystery together.
Yeah. I've read a lot of fantasy that has two, sci-fi that's read two. I mean, it has two. It's just, of course, I tend to read a lot of romance in all genres, so that probably adds to that. But yeah, why not?
I'd say why not too. All right, let's dive into deep point of view. Third person seems to be so dry at times. Maybe tips on adding emotion to what can seem like a distant point of view.
I don't write third person, so I'm gonna let you guys.
A lot of times things seem dull because you're not using your senses, the character senses a lot. I think if you as the author are too far removed, you're set too back as you're watching your character, then you're watching it like as if a movie is playing. And I see a lot of people describe third person as being like there's a camera on the character's shoulder and that's what you see, and that's how you can kind of determine how to stay in that point of view. But I think the camera thing is also a little bit deceiving, because that's just playing on your sight. And to really bring your characters to life and put the reader like in their mind, you need to experience everything with them, and that includes the sounds and the tastes and the sensations and all that sort of stuff. So I would say use your senses, and I would also say use a lot of internal thoughts. And I think we might have a question about how to format internal thoughts later on, so I won't go into that too much, but there's no reason not to have internal thoughts in third person, and that is what definitely brings you fully into that character, is knowing those internals rather than just a play-by-play of action.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would say third person point of view, there are levels of how deep you are inside of that point of view. And we're going to be talking about deep point of view here. We have a few questions about deep point of view, and I pulled up a website that has different examples of maybe a pulled back point of view and a deeper point of view. And I can link to this article in the comments. Let me just put it in the comments. This will show up on YouTube, but not in Facebook. So sorry, Facebook people. But you can run over to YouTube to get the thing, and I can try to post it.
I'll pop it up on here. There you go.
There you go.
Then we don't
All
have
right,
to remember to add it later.
You are awesome. All right. So with this article, they talk about how to get deeper into the point of view. So I'm going to read a little section. They did it as an example of a less deep point of view. At last, the tremors subsided and the earth stilled. Maggie wondered how bad the earthquake had been. She looked around and saw the deep black gashes in the ground where the pavement of the road had cracked. She knew it must have been at least a 7.0. So with that one, you're pulled back a little bit. Now, in deeper point of view, you get rid of some of these words like wondered, saw, and knew, and you can pull in deeper. So the example is, at last the tremors subsided and the earth stilled. How bad had this one been? See that? Now that is a thought that she is having, and it's just put in there. It's not like Maggie wondered how bad it had been. It's just put her thought in there. How bad had this one been? All around, wide cracks gashed the pavement as though the road were soft as flesh. Now that's another example of pulling in deeper, making an example of what she's seeing rather than just describing it. Despite the heat, a shiver coursed up Maggie's spine. She sat unblinking, rattled by the devastation. So getting rid of some of those filter words can help pull in to a deeper point of view and just giving us some of their thoughts as they're thinking them rather than saying, well, she wondered this or she thought about that, can pull us in deeper.
Yeah.
All right. Someone would like to know about the pitfalls to avoid while writing deep point of view. Any thoughts on what to avoid?
I think deep third has some of the same problems that first person can have, where you just get so close to the character that you lose some of the perspective on the overall story, and you lose some of your objectivity. Mm-hmm. So it just really depends on what you're trying to achieve with this scene. So, like sometimes.
You can have them thinking way too much sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Too much of that internal thought. And it's good to be there in it, but sometimes the character the reader almost gets exhausted by it. And having a little bit more separation, a little bit more space allows them to kind of view this, like participate in the story, but not like be the story.
Only add some important things.
Yeah. And, yeah. So, and like the same thing, like we don't always want to know, like in deep third, theoretically, like you would know every time they got like a gas bubble or every time they like, had like some like random crazy thought. And I think limited kind of is more of a narrator chooses what you know kind of thing, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does, but yeah, it creates a little bit more separation and a little bit more of a filter, which can be actually really useful.
And you can pull in and pull out too.
Yeah, you can.
So go in deeper and then you can pull out a little bit and not be as deep.
Absolutely.
Oh, all right. So another question, if you write really well in deep third person, is it okay to stick with that and not maybe move with the trends that you see maybe everybody else is writing in first person? Is it okay to stick with what you feel like you write best?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So it's best to write a better story, right? So if you can do it better that way, then do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say yes, but I also wouldn't limit yourself too much. I mean, sometimes it stretches you to write in a different perspective or a different point of view. So maybe try it a little bit and see if you can stretch yourself.
No, I'm only going to stick to first, guys. Sorry.
But you've tried third, right?
Yes, I did.
So if you try it
okay, but
and it's just not your favorite, then I mean, absolutely go back and do what works best for you. But yeah, I think it's important, like Victory said, to push yourself and just experiment and see, because then you won't have to wonder. You'll know, like, yeah, third person is my jam, or first person is. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Because we all just want to become masters of our craft. And if you didn't try those other things, who knows? Maybe that could actually be your best way of writing. Who knows?
Yeah.
That's true. Always learning. All right. So thoughts on separating internal dialogue with the regular story in first person. This person's seen it done different ways and wants to know our opinion on how to separate that out.
I think it depends. For me, if I'm writing in third person and I am going to have an internal thought that's separate from, for example, he opened the window wide and looked out down the street. He saw a girl in a black hood coming his direction. Okay. Then he thought, who is she? Then I might put who is she in italics, because it's separate from the narration. It's moving in, and it shows that that's like an internal thought. It would be the same for me. Like if he said it out loud, I would put it in quotation marks, but because he said it in his head, I put it in italics. But it's different in first person, where basically all of the narration is is an internal thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't usually use italics in first person, like hardly ever, unless it's for emphasis on something. So that's generally my personal rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm.
It gets really messy if you try and put thoughts into quotation marks, like you do quotation as if it was dialogue he thought. I think that's a lot more clunky.
Mm-hmm.
So I always do try and use the italics for thoughts in third person.
Yep. And the next question is really similar to that. Some writers get away with slipping into first person for characters' intense reactions. They slip back into third to signal they're moving on. To me, this works when it's fluid. It makes the writing more intimate and allows the reader to better identify with the character. What do other writers, agents, publishers think about this? She does it herself, but it's hard to control.
So they're switching from first to third?
I'd have to see an example of that.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you're writing in third person for an internal thought, you can say, I didn't think anybody was moving in down the street, for your example, Michelle.
Right.
And you put that in italics. Right. I think that's what she's talking about.
Like and Judy didn't think
people
she was
do that a lot.
Yeah. Whereas if you switch fully into first person, your narration, your exposition would have pronouns of I and me. Right. So that would be the difference. If you're writing in third person, then all of your pronouns should be he or she or they or, something like that. And all of the I pronouns should be used with first person. So those internal thoughts where you might slip, like Victorine said, into an I thought or a me thought should be set apart in italics so that the reader knows that's an internal thought. Otherwise, I think it would be really jarring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And if you're writing in deep third, then you don't switch into first person. You just say those thoughts in third person. So you would have to stick with third person, but you would be deeper in their point of view. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, it'd be a mess. I'm trying to think.
Just read some of, Michelle and Victorine's books and see how they did it.
There's probably some experimental literature out there that does it. And that's fine. It's just if you're writing genre fiction, I think it's generally best to stick to one point of view, at least within a scene or a chapter. I do know some people like to switch and do first person in some point of view characters and third person for other point of view characters in the same book. Mm-hmm. I still would have a hard time with that as a reader. It would be really jarring to me, but I guess some people have done it successfully. So
I've read a couple books like that were really popular, but not very many. And I think it's harder to do. So just kind of go with your gut on that and do what you feel is best for your book. We did have a question about switching point of views on each book. So if they have some books written in first person and some books written in third person, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think point of view should be a story choice, not a career choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about in a series? If you're writing in a series, should they all stick with the same?
I like to stay the same in a series.
Yeah.
Personally.
I've had them where I've had like dual point of view, like my Ridgewater High series. There's like 3 books that are dual point of view, and then 3 books that are just from the female main characters' heads. So,
but they were all first person.
They were all first person, yeah. And that's why I switched with my my adult series. The first book was third person, and the rest of them were in first person. So that's why I went back and changed that first book to match the rest of the series.
Yeah.
All right, we have a couple questions from people watching. Lori says, I'm writing a series. My first book switched back and forth between male main character point of view and female main character. Does the rest of the series need to be consistent as the first book? I'm working on book 2 right now and has only been female main character point of view.
I just said you didn't have to, so.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like, what was the reason you did decide to go back and make them match?
Like the
Yeah,
I
why
didn't
did
I didn't make the match with the dual point of view versus just one character. So every other
Oh,
book.
that's right. You did the point of view.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
It just I think it just depends on the story and
Yeah.
whose story it is more. If it's both of their story equally, then
if it's going to be dull and boring and not add anything to the story to add the male point of view in, then, if it does a disservice to your story, then don't do it. But on the other hand, like, I think a series is kind of like a familiar territory, and that's why people like it. They like the series concept because it's like coming home to something familiar. And so the more you kind of unsettle them and shake things up, the more difficult it is to keep them loyal to the series. So I don't know. You might get a lot of reviews saying like, I really wanted to hear things from his because they were expecting it from the first book. Set out what you're going to do like from the beginning of something. I always say, like,
I think that's a good general advice. And
Yeah.
and then if you get into it, and I know with new writers, it's so hard because you don't know what you want to be doing. So you're trying stuff out all the time. And when I was a new writer, I wrote in one genre, then another genre, then another genre. I was just trying out stuff. So you may switch around a little bit as a new writer, and then find your groove. And you know what? I really like just the female point of view in my romance novels, and so maybe that's what you'll settle on. But I'd like to try to stick with the same pattern if I'm doing a series.
Yep.
Yeah, now that I'm wiser, I totally do that too.
Well, thinking about my first YA series, I did the same thing where I added the male point of view in the second book, but the second book is also about the same couple. So like it's kind of a mess just in general.
Yeah. All right. Jessie wants to know, what's an example of unreliable narrator?
Someone who is keeping a secret, like when the narrator is keeping a secret from the reader. And like just like skipping over certain things, maybe sometimes you can't always trust what they're saying. And so like Gone Girl has an unreliable narrator. So does this pirate book I've heard about. The Pirate Ruse or something. The False Prince does. I don't know.
Here you go. There's 2 examples. Good job, Judy.
Awesome. I didn't know any, so good job.
I was, trying to do this unreliable narrator thing a while ago, so it's like, I made a post in the Writing Gals Facebook group a couple months ago asking for recommendations. So look up Judy Corey unreliable narrator, and there you go. So
good idea. All right, Lori has another question. In her first book of the series, she gave the point of view of the bad guy. In the first draft, she kept it secret, but her beta readers complained about it. So she rewrote it and showed who the bad guy was with his point of view. In a couple of her reviews, they complained that they knew who it was. Which one is best?
This depends on what you think, what you want. Like, do you want it to be a mystery or do you not want it to be a mystery, really?
Yeah. Is it more about the tension and the conflict, or is it about the surprise? So it's interesting because Lori's book was more of a romantic suspense, I think. And so that suspense thing doesn't have to be like a mystery. It doesn't have to be like you don't know who the bad guy is. The suspense part is everything going to turn out okay kind of thing. And sometimes knowing more about the villain can actually make things more suspenseful. If you know what they're planning and what's coming ahead, it can add to that tension and suspense that you feel for the main characters.
Yeah.
So, but people are going to complain every which way. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. I think it's probably a good idea to go ahead and put them in there, especially so that they knew going like earlier in the story that it was more of a suspense story and not just a romance.
Good. I agree. All right, Jessie wants to know, what's an example of head hopping?
When we're hearing one character's thoughts and then suddenly hearing another's thoughts just randomly and then going back to the other one within a few sentences sometimes.
Judy thought that the person at the door was going to be her boyfriend, and then it goes to
His
But her
mother,
husband
however,
was
had a
like,
different
"What?"
opinion, or her mother had a different opinion.
yeah.
Like whoever the point of view character is, you should not know what anybody else in the room is thinking unless they tell you. You shouldn't know what they're feeling unless they show you by like physical signs. You shouldn't understand their motivations for things. You just see their actions. Does that make sense? So you don't say, well, I'm going to try and stop her from talking, so I'm going to throw a pillow at her head, from somebody who's not the point of view character. The point of view
The other
character
character's like, suddenly I can't see. And then,
yeah, the point of character should just get hit with the pillow. It's just remembering like whose voice is telling the story, and that's the only character that you can know thoughts and feelings and motivations for. Just by that narration. Dialogue is different, obviously. So like if you feel like you want to show someone's thought that's not the main point of view character, then they need to say something, or they need to do something that can infer that. So point of view slips are easy to do, no matter how good you are.
Yeah, I still catch them. All right. If you're in one person's head, character 1 in a scene, but then tell the reader about another person, character 2's thoughts, how would character 1 know what character 2 feels? So that's just like head hopping. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to tell the reader what character 2's thoughts are, but you can show it by how they're reacting. So,
so the other character would be like, oh, he like stiffened suddenly. He must not like what just happened or something.
Or if character 1 knows character 2 so well that they can infer, and then you just have to make it clear that they're inferring, that they don't know. Like you could say, oh, I could see he was steamy. He probably hated that his ex-girlfriend came to the party. It wouldn't be like it would. So it would be the character 1 making an inference on what that character was thinking based on what they knew about them.
Yeah.
Instead of it coming directly from character 2.
Awesome. All right. Any other thoughts? We covered it all.
I hope so. Point of view is always a question that we get a lot about, and it is really hard to learn. But a good thing, I think a good way to learn about point of view is to critique other people or beta read for other people and help them to find their point of view slips, because for some reason it's a lot easier to see other people's than it is to see your own. And so you can just kind of start picking up on what that is because it jumps out a lot of times in other people's works that you're too close to your own to see it most of the time. So I recommend a lot of that.
This is probably why I've never had him slip up with that, because I've never noticed. Just kidding. Can't notice it myself.
Never.
All right. Click like and subscribe if you want to see more of our videos, and go check out our channel on YouTube, because we have a lot of past videos that we've talked about all kinds of things. And we will be back in a couple of weeks.
Talking about something cool.
As always. And hopefully Amy will be back with us.
Yes. That'll be great. All right, you guys. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Yeah.